Liverpool, September 2018, 3:15 p.m. Paul McCartney was sitting in a small cafe on Penny Lane, the street that inspired one of his most famous songs. He came here sometimes when he was in Liverpool, to remember, to connect with the past, to feel like Paul from Liverpool instead of Paul McCartney, the legend. An elderly man was sitting at the next table, maybe 80, maybe older, weathered face, shaking hands, the kind of person you see in cafes and barely notice. Just another old man having tea, existing, invisible. But this man noticed Paul, recognized him, and instead of asking for an autograph or a photo, he did something different. He started crying, not loud sobbing, quiet tears, the kind that come from somewhere deep, from a place of loss, of memory, of something broken that never healed. Paul noticed, set down his coffee, walked over. "Are you all right?" The old man looked up, wiped his eyes, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bother you. It's just seeing you here, on Penny Lane. It brought back memories. Good memories or bad ones?" "Both." The man smiled sadly. "My name is James Whitmore, and 53 years ago, your music saved my life. But I never got to say thank you until now." Paul sat down. "Tell me." And what James told Paul in the next 20 minutes didn't just break Paul's heart. It set off a chain of events that would take 6 months of research, countless phone calls, and Paul's determination to fix something that had been broken for over half a century. But to understand why Paul McCartney cried in a cafe on Penny Lane in September 2018, and why what he did next changed an entire family's history, you need to understand what James Whitmore lost in 1965, and why he'd been searching for it ever since. James Whitmore was 27 years old in 1965, married, 2 kids, a daughter, Emily, age 5, a son, Thomas, age 3, working as a mechanic in Liverpool, not rich, not poor, just getting by, building a life, building a family, being a father, being a husband, being happy. But mental health in 1965 wasn't understood the way it is now. Depression wasn't talked about. Anxiety wasn't acknowledged. PTSD from childhood trauma wasn't diagnosed. You were just told to be strong, to man up, to deal with it. James had been dealing with it his whole life. Dark thoughts, overwhelming sadness, the feeling that he didn't deserve happiness, that his family would be better off without him, that he was a burden, a failure, worthless. In August 1965, it got too much. He decided to end it, went to the River Mersey late at night, stood at the edge, ready to jump, ready to disappear, ready to stop the pain the only way he knew how. But then he heard music, coming from a pub nearby, a jukebox playing Help. The Beatles, Paul's voice, John's voice, singing about needing help, about needing somebody. Not just anybody, somebody who understood, who cared, who could make the darkness less dark. James stood there, listening. The song played twice. Someone must have fed the jukebox coins, played it again and again. And in those 6 minutes, something shifted. The darkness didn't disappear, but it loosened, just enough, just barely enough. He didn't jump that night, walked home instead, got help, real help. A doctor who listened, medicine that worked, therapy that saved him. And for the next 53 years, every time James heard a Beatles song, he remembered that night, remembered how close he'd come to ending everything, remembered that Help had given him 6 more minutes, and those 6 minutes had saved his life. But here's what James didn't tell Paul at first. Here's the part that would make Paul cry. Here's the part that would set everything in motion. When James went into the hospital for treatment in 1965, his wife couldn't handle it. The stigma, the shame, the judgment. Mental illness wasn't talked about. It was hidden, denied, treated like a moral failure instead of a medical condition. She left, took the kids, Emily and Thomas, disappeared, changed their names, started a new life somewhere Paul didn't know. And James, when he got out of the hospital 3 months later, came home to an empty house. No wife, no children, no note, no forwarding address, Nothing. He'd spent 53 years searching, hiring investigators, checking records, following leads that went nowhere. But Emily and Thomas had vanished, and James had lived the rest of his life wondering if they were okay, if they remembered him, if they hated him for being sick, if they even knew he'd been looking. "I'm 81 years old now," James told Paul, his voice shaking, "and I don't have much time left. I just wanted to thank you, because help gave me 53 more years. And even though I never found my children, those years mattered. I got to live. I got to see the world change. I got to hear your music grow and evolve. And that was enough. It had to be enough." Paul sat there, silent, tears running down his face. Not subtle tears, not polite tears. Real, heavy tears. The kind you can't control. The kind that come from hearing something so sad and so beautiful at the same time that your heart can't handle it. "James," Paul said quietly, "what were their names, your children, their full names?" "Emily Rose Whitmore, Thomas James Whitmore." "And your wife?" Margaret Ann Whitmore." Paul pulled out his phone. "Type something." "What year did they leave?" 1965, October, right after I went into hospital." "And you've been looking ever since?" 53 years. But the trail went cold decades ago. They changed their names, moved, probably don't even remember me. I was just a sick father who disappeared from their lives." Paul wiped his eyes, looked at James. "You didn't disappear. You got sick. You got help. You survived. That's not disappearing. That's fighting. That's courage. Tell that to my children, if they even know I exist." Paul stood up. "James, I want to help. I want to find Emily and Thomas. Will you let me try?" James looked skeptical. "Paul, I've been trying for 53 years. I've spent every penny I had on investigators. What makes you think?" "Because I'm Paul McCartney, and I have resources you don't have. Connections. People who can access records, who can trace names, who can find people who don't want to be found. Not because I'm better than the investigators you hired. Because I have access they don't." "Why would you do this? You don't know me. I'm just an old man who told you a sad story." "You're not just anything," Paul said. "You're James, and your story matters. And if my song saved your life, the least I can do is help you find the people you've been searching for." What happened next took 6 months. Paul hired the best investigators in the UK, people who specialized in finding missing persons, people who understood how to navigate records from the 1960s, birth certificates, name changes, marriage licenses, census data, school enrollment, medical records, everything. But it wasn't easy. Margaret Whitmore had been thorough. When she left James, she'd erased their connection completely, changed the children's last name to her maiden name, Sullivan, moved to Scotland, enrolled them in new schools under new names, started over, like James had never existed. The investigators found Margaret first. She died in 1998, heart attack. But before she died, she told Emily and Thomas the truth, that their father wasn't dead like she'd said, that he'd been sick, that she'd run because she couldn't handle it, that she was sorry. Emily and Thomas had spent 20 years looking for James, just like James had spent 53 years looking for them. Ships passing in the night, searching for each other but never connecting, never finding, because the names didn't match, because the records were incomplete, because sometimes finding people isn't about trying hard enough. It's about having the right resources, the right access, the right connections. Paul's investigators found Emily in Edinburgh, a teacher, married, 3 kids, 60 years old, still wondering if her father was alive, still hoping she'd find him someday, still carrying the guilt of leaving him even though it hadn't been her choice. She'd been 5 years old. She hadn't understood. She'd just known her father was gone and never came back. They found Thomas in Manchester, a carpenter, divorced, 2 kids, 59 years old, angry, bitter, convinced his father had abandoned them, convinced he'd never wanted to be found, convinced the mental illness story was an excuse, because he'd been 3 years old when it happened. He didn't remember. He only knew what his mother had told him, and what his mother had told him was wrong. Paul got their phone numbers, their addresses, their entire lives documented in reports that sat on his desk, and he could have just given that information to James. Could have said, "Here, this is where they are. Good luck." But Paul didn't do that, because Paul understood something important. This wasn't just about finding people, it was about healing, about understanding, about bridging 53 years of pain and confusion and anger and loss. And that required more than addresses. It required context, preparation, care. Paul flew to Edinburgh, showed up at Emily's house unannounced. When she opened the door and saw Paul McCartney standing there, she thought she was hallucinating. "Emily Sullivan?" Paul asked. "Yes." "I need to talk to you about your father." "James Whitmore." Her face went white. "How do you know that name?" "Because I met him 6 months ago in Liverpool, and he told me his story about 1965, about getting sick, about how your mother left, about how he spent 53 years looking for you." Emily started crying, right there in her doorway. "He's alive? My father's alive. Very much alive. And he's been looking for you his entire life. He never stopped. Not once." They talked for 2 hours. Paul explained everything: the hospital, the treatment, the recovery, the empty house, the 53 years of searching, the investigators, the dead ends, the hope that never died even when it should have. Emily cried the entire time. "I thought he was dead. My mother said he was dead, that he died in the hospital. That's what she told us. For 33 years, I thought my father was dead. Then before she died, she admitted the truth, that she'd lied, that he'd been alive. But by then, I didn't know where to look. I didn't know how to find him." "You don't have to look anymore," Paul said gently. "I found him, and now I'm bringing you two together. If you want that, if you're ready." "I've been ready for 53 years." Paul flew to Manchester. Same conversation, same shock. But Thomas's reaction was different. Not tears, anger. "Why should I care about a father who abandoned us?" "He didn't abandon you. He got sick. He went to hospital. And when he came home, you were gone. Your mother took you, changed your names. He's been looking for you for 53 years, Thomas. That's not abandonment. That's love. He could have tried harder. He tried as hard as he could. But your mother made it impossible. She erased you from existence, changed everything. How do you find someone who doesn't exist on paper?" Thomas was quiet for a long time. Then, "Is he okay?" "My father. Is he healthy?" "He's 81, and he's running out of time. But yes, he's okay. And he wants to meet you, both of you, if you'll let him." Thomas's wall cracked, just a little. "I don't know if I can. I've been angry at him my whole life." "Then be angry, but be angry in person. Let him explain. Let him apologize for something that wasn't his fault. Let him see you, because he spent 53 years wondering if you're alive. If you're happy, if you remember him, don't let him die without knowing." March 2019, Liverpool. Paul rented a small private room at a restaurant, decorated it, made it warm, made it safe, made it a place where broken things could start to heal. James arrived first. Paul had picked him up, driven him, prepared him. "Are you ready?" Paul asked. James's hands were shaking, not from age, from fear. "What if they hate me? What if they blame me?" "Then you deal with that. But I don't think they will. I think they've been waiting for this their entire lives, just like you have." Emily arrived, walked in, saw her father. 53 years older than she remembered, but still him, still her dad, still the man who'd read her bedtime stories before everything fell apart. She ran to him, hugged him, cried into his shoulder. "Daddy, I thought you were dead. I thought I'd lost you forever." James held her, sobbing. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never left. I was looking. I was always looking." "I know. Paul told me." "I know." Thomas arrived 20 minutes later, stood in the doorway, watching his father and sister, not moving, not sure what to do. 56 years of anger and confusion and pain, all colliding at once. Paul walked over, quietly. "You don't have to do this, but I think you'll regret it if you don't." Thomas took a breath, walked to his father. James looked up, saw his son, the little boy who'd been 3 years old the last time they'd seen each other. Now a man, 60 years old, weathered, tired, angry, but still his son. "Thomas," James whispered. "Dad." They didn't hug immediately. Thomas wasn't ready for that, but he sat down, and they talked. And slowly, over the course of 3 hours, 53 years of misunderstanding started to unravel, started to heal, started to become something new. Paul watched from the doorway, crying, not sad tears, grateful tears, happy tears. The kind that come from witnessing something beautiful, something impossible, something that proves love doesn't die even when it seems like it should. James Whitmore lived for 2 more years. He died in March 2021, peacefully, surrounded by his children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren, people he'd never thought he'd meet, people who'd spent 53 years not knowing he existed. At his funeral, Emily gave a eulogy. She talked about her father, about mental illness, about stigma, about how families break when society doesn't understand. And then she talked about Paul. "Paul McCartney didn't just find my father. He gave us back something we thought was lost forever. Family, connection, love. He spent 6 months and who knows how much money searching for people he'd never met because one old man told him a sad story in a cafe. That's not fame. That's humanity. That's what it means to care about people." Paul was at the funeral, in the back, quiet, not wanting attention, just wanting to witness the ending of a story he'd helped write, the happy ending James had deserved all along. After the service, Thomas approached him. "I never thanked you for finding us, for caring enough to try. You don't need to thank me. Your father thanked me every day for 2 years. That was enough." "No, it's not enough. You changed our lives. My sister got 2 years with her father. I got 2 years to understand mine. My children got to meet their grandfather. That's everything." Paul smiled. "That's what music is for. Connecting people, healing people, reminding them they're not alone. Help did that for your father in 1965. I just finished what the song started, September 2018. Paul McCartney heard an old man's story in a cafe on Penny Lane, and he broke down, cried, not because the story was sad, because it was beautiful, because James had survived, because music had saved someone, because art matters in ways we can't always measure. But Paul didn't just cry. He changed everything. He used his resources, his connections, his power to do something most people couldn't do. He found people who'd been lost for 53 years. He reunited a family that had been broken by stigma and misunderstanding. He gave an 81-year-old man 2 more years with his children, 2 years that mattered more than all the years before. That's the Paul McCartney the world doesn't see. The one who stops when other people keep walking, who listens when other people ignore, who acts when other people shrug and move on, who understands that fame is worthless unless you use it to make the world a little bit better, a little bit kinder, a little bit more whole. James Whitmore told Paul that help saved his life, but Paul saved James's legacy, made sure he didn't die alone, made sure his children knew the truth, made sure 53 years of searching ended with reunion instead of regret. That's everything. Look, if this story moved you, do me a favor. Hit that like button. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? We're dropping these untold Beatles stories every single day, and trust me, the next one is even more powerful. Drop a comment and let me know. Have you ever tried to find someone you lost? Have you ever witnessed a reunion that changed everything? And hey, turn those notifications on, because next time we're telling the story of what happened when Ringo Starr found out a drummer was being bullied for copying his style. What he did next became legendary. Remember, the best use of fame is making other people's lives better. And Paul McCartney proved that on Penny Lane in 2018, when he met a stranger and decided to change his world.